All right, what's going on, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Market Misfits podcast. Today, I am joined by Mr. Look Left, Mr. Iron Condor, Mr. Anchored VWAP himself, Ronchero Friedman. Ron, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. How are you? I'm looking
Good.
left.
See, I caught you off guard with the intro there.
I'm looking left.
Mr. Look Left is my new favorite thing now that you've said in the room. So I had to play off at least a little bit. So for those that are new to the podcast or don't know who we are both members of the Steamroom trading group. Ron is an educator, a trader, and someone that has been doing this for a very long time, and a person that I have a lot of respect for because he taught me an immense amount about the markets. So this is really cool for me to kind of hear his story. So that's kind of what we're going to go in today is, how did Ron basically enter the steam room? And how did this whole thing kind of came to be? And we're going to go way back to the time when he started trading and how we got into the entire industry, across the board. So, Ron, let's kind of start. Let's go back. Let's start there. Where the hell did you actually get your start when it came to this game, or how did you even know you wanted to be in this game that we call trading?
And that's a great. First of all, it's a great question. I think if I think about this a little bit and go back in time, and I know Jay went back in time, and he went back to kind of how things got started for him. I think the original fascination for me was when I was growing up. Excuse me, and this was in the Midwest. We had moved from New York to outside of Chicago, and there were some people in our community and some dads who were traders, and they always had the biggest houses, the nicest cars. They went on the most amazing vacations, all of these things. And it was always one of those, well, what is it that they do? How do they do what they do? Like, how, do you get a salary for this? Like, how does this work? Right. And I was always fascinated with the answers that I would get back were, well, this is so-and-so, and, he's a commodities trader, and, he can make $1 million in a year. And then sometimes he doesn't make $1 million. And I was just like, I don't understand how it works. All I know is I'm fascinated by it because, even at an early age, I always saw, I think I always viewed money, having wealth as a means of not having to be tied to things, right? Like tied to a mortgage, tied to obligations, right? I mean, money is one of those things that allows you to get time back, right? Because ultimately what happens is you trade your time for money in whatever it is that you do to acquire that money to do things to pay your rent, pay your mortgage, buy a car, put food on your table, all of those things, right? And having a surplus of it allows you to, get either get nicer things or build a cushion that allow you to do things like not have to work, right? Travel, et cetera, et cetera. So I was always fascinated by that world, and it kind of dated back to when I was, early on in high school and seeing some of these kids, and they're mostly their dads. There weren't a lot of women who were in that industry, but that's kind of where it went back to. And I was always fascinated with, and it was always a conversation that I would have with my dad that was typically one-sided. And what I mean by that is it was like, listen, you're not smart enough to do that, and you're never gonna be smart enough to do that, and you don't have the right pedigree to do this. You're not a kid that's going to wind up going to an Ivy League school, and you don't have the right connections to get involved into that world. And then later on in life, I find out, especially these guys that worked in the pit and the SIBO, these are guys that just barely graduated high school, right? Like a lot of them, it was just more like, who's tall, big, aggressive, loud, and can do fundamental math in their head quickly and make decisions. And I was like, well, I didn't need to go to freaking Yale or Harvard for that. You know what I mean? So that was always kind of like an inspiration for me was, well, I think what I'm hearing from you, Dad, is you don't really know how it works, and you don't think that I can do it. So, number one, I'll figure out how it works because I'm interested in it. And number two, if you think I'm not smart enough to be able to do it, that was always a motivator for me to say, okay, well, F you, I can do it, and watch me do it. Right. So
Yeah.
it's a very, for those people who have um, that kind of button in them when somebody says you can't do something and they're like, F you, I can, watch, right? Like
Yeah. I'm
there's
the
there's
same way.
there,
You know
there's
that. I'm the
yeah
same way.
there's a good handful of us out there, and that's all it took for somebody like me. That was just like, if you think I can't do it, I'm gonna do it. So that was all the motivation I needed to get to be interested and to kind of carry on. But from that point to where I got to was a very long, circuitous route to get there. Like I think I went to college primarily because I needed to not be in my parents' house anymore, and I needed time to mature. And it's arguable that I ever really did. So, earning the degree, and then I didn't go right into finance after school, and it was because I had that. I still can't find my way into that business. I don't know how I'm supposed to get in. And I wanted to do other things when I graduated from school. Like I didn't even go into the professional world right after school. I did have a professional job, and it was in, oddly enough, it was in like freight brokerage. Like I would pick up the phone and call.
Really?
Yeah, it was like delivering pallets of newspaper inserts that you would get on a Sunday. All the freaking advertisements, right? Like that stuff would get printed and get put on pallets, and then truck drivers would have to deliver it to newspapers by a certain date, a certain time, so that those inserts could go into the papers and people could open their Sunday paper and get the freaking 15-cent coupon to get a cucumber at fucking Jewel or Oscar or whatever it was. You know what I mean? So it was like a fucking stupid job.
What did you even go to school for, though? Like, what did you study? Did you study
My
finance?
No, my undergrad was communications.
Another communication. That Jay was the same way. Jay was comms.
And the reason it was because I was like, I have no idea. I was like, I have no idea what I want to do. And then I remember some of my fraternity brothers were getting a business major in a up and coming field at the time, which was logistics. And logistics is just the science of moving shit, right? Trucks,
Yep.
trains, warehousing, all of that, which obviously today is massive business, right? Like if you look at an Amazon,
Sure.
it's all logistics, right? So I got my minor in logistics because I was because a communications major doesn't get a fucking job. You know what I mean?
Right.
I needed something else to help me get a job, which is how I got a job fucking selling, inserts into Sunday papers and
Yeah,
getting
you
into
were like an OG
alcohol,
Dunder
right?
Mifflin kind of guy,
Yeah,
right? In the
totally.
paper industry.
It was just awful. But those are the jobs that you get if you're not, and even if you go to a top tier school and you're a super competitive and smart individual, it still just leads to, at least initially, you've got to get your feet wet somewhere. It initially leads to a 9 to 5, right? And that 9 to 5 again just grinds right back to, I'm trading my time for money, and I need the money. And because I got to pay rent, right? And when you're young and you graduate from school, and I've seen so many like young people today complain about it on socials, is like, I just graduated. I got to commute to work. It's a long way to go to work. The traffic sucks. I can barely afford to pay for my car. I get home at the end of the day, and it's, by the time I get home, it's like 6:30 or 7 o'clock. I'm too tired to make any dinner. I don't have any money to buy something to eat. I'm scraping together my last freaking $1.50 to walk down to fucking Taco Bell because I don't have enough gas money to drive there and back because I got to commute to this stupid ass job that's not paying me enough. I got to turn the freaking lights out at 8 because I can't afford the damn utility. I'm just like, most of us lived through that same thing. We just didn't have a way to communicate that we were frustrated and unhappy with that, right? So I was largely frustrated and unhappy with that, and just was like, there has got to be a way to get around it. But until I figured it out, in that shitty freight broker job that I had, I was like, I'm not doing this. And I packed up my shit and I moved to Colorado, and I was a ski instructor in the wintertime. And
No way.
yeah, and
Oh,
I did that for 3 years, and a lot of skiing, a lot of fly fishing, a lot of mountain biking, waiting tables, whatever I could do to make that last as long as I could. And then at the end of 3 seasons of doing that, it just wasn't sustainable, right?
yeah.
It was way more enjoyable than being a fucking freight broker on a phone in a shit office with people I didn't know, like, or trust, than to go and basically make the same being a ski instructor and fly fishing guide. Like that was way more enjoyable than being a fucking freight broker. But then I kind of got forced, from a monetary standpoint, back down into Denver, and started working, and then started going to school, grad school, for my degree in finance. And that was where I started to finally get some more, I kind of blew the stink off of myself, and got to, like, 27, 28 years old, and then started, grad school. And grad school opened that education that I needed for, okay, well, what are these different jobs in finance that people do? Accounting, general finance, CFO work, CFA work, different types of analyst work. How does that connect and work in the markets, right? So I did that, and I was again, same thing. I was just working some shit jobs to get by, and then I found my way into, because finally I had found somebody who knew somebody that had a connection at a discount brokerage company called Oldie, OLDE, Oldie Discount Corporation. And if you know Matt Kelman in the room,
Yep.
he did the same. He did the same thing. He worked for Oldie as well. We may have been the same vintage, but they put him in an office where he didn't want to be, and he was like, "I'm out." I did it for a while, and I did not enjoy it. I learned a lot, but I didn't enjoy it. The environment was, hey, you come in at, and this was Denver time, you come in at 6:30 in the morning, you stay till 9 o'clock at night, Monday through Friday, right? So you're in market hours, you're helping, you're an assistant to a broker, and you're unlicensed, which means you can't talk to clients, right? What you can do is generate leads for those brokers, right? So you're on the phone from 6:30 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night. During market hours, you're helping the broker get clients on the line for them. You've got the daily number that you needed to hit was to make 300 dials a day.
Oh,
And
Jesus.
if you didn't make 300 dials a day, at the end of the week, they kept track. The people that didn't make the 300 dials a day got handed a cardboard box and shown the door. It was a really we do not give two shits environment, and we will
We'll replace you. You're replaceable.
we'll replace you and abuse you for as long as we see fit until you can prove that you can do this, and that we think you'll fit, and we'll allow you to take the Series 7 exam. And after that, then you're still going to be working for a quote unquote senior broker, and you've got to build a book of business, and that book of business needs to be a certain dollar amount. And once you reach a certain dollar amount, you can become your own independent broker. And then once you reached a certain point, then you could get your own associate broker as well. And that environment was horrendous. Anybody who worked in that environment and for that company can attest to how shittily, if you when you start at the bottom rung, there it's a whole packing order, and it was just a horrible environment. But what it taught me was where the money gets made is on the trading desk. Where the money doesn't get made is in the chair of the retail broker. The retail broker's job is to generate commissions. The retail broker's job is not to trade stock. It's not to analyze stock. It's to bring money in the door and churn it in the form of trading. Now, churning is a dirty word in our business, and it just means you're trading for the sake of trading to generate commissions. And for a large part of the time I was there, that's kind of what they did was right up to the line of what FINRA would describe as churning. And if as long as you were under that line, they didn't, they left you alone, right?
Right. And this was your first exposure though too, right? Like postgraduate school, this is like the first exposure you had to the markets, right?
Yeah.
Like this is it.
Yeah, but to me it was important because it got me to the point to where now I finally, after all of these years, understand how the sausage gets made. Where is the money being made? So finally connecting the dots after 10 years of first being introduced to, that guy, that kid's dad's a trader, and here's how he makes $1 million a year. That was a freaking 10-year journey to figure out, what does it actually mean? Right. How do they actually do it? Nobody could explain it to me, right? Like, I didn't understand what the difference between bid and ask was. I didn't understand that the difference between the bid and the ask is referred to as the spread. I didn't understand that if there's a bid ask spread of, let's say, $1, and you're the trading desk and you get your client to buy 1,000 shares of XYZ, and the asking price is 10, but the offer is 9, that the trading desk on that 1,000 shares makes $1,000 because the spread is $1 times 1,000 shares. Now think about that. If they do that, if that stock has high volume and they transact that stock, let's say 100,000 times in a day, and the spread is $1, think about how much money is being made for the trading desk. Like that was, I was like, holy shit, like I need to be a trader. That's where the light bulb, I was just like, now I get it. Now I understand how it just fundamentally that works. And I was like, I don't want to be a retail broker. I want to be the guy who has the money and is placing the trades, right? Like that's where I wanted to be. And then of course, that environment changed. The NASDAQ became more regulated, right? So that bid ask spread, those things went away. The quoting of stocks in halves, quarters, 16ths, 30 seconds, all of that stuff went away. It went to pennies. The NASDAQ did away with those massive inefficiencies in the markets, right? So all of that stuff went away. And then obviously it evolved to, most of this shit is done via a screen now, right?
Right.
That kind of killed the trading floors. So this whole evolution of where we evolved to today, that my journey kind of started as a retail broker and then kind of evolved, from there. Now, that being said, the evolution from that retail brokerage world, especially when those spreads started, going away, forced me to make changes. And I was at that point in time, I'd kind of worked my way to a position where I did have an opportunity to go to Chicago to work as an associate trader with a firm on the SIBO. And at the time, my ex was like, "Hey, if you want to do this and you want to go, you're going to have to go and do this by yourself because I first of all, I'm not moving to Chicago with you, and number two, you'll be dead before you're 40 because it's too much stress." And I was like, so that kind of forced me into going back into a normal 9 to 5 to kind of satisfy that relationship and the need in that world to provide, right? To
Right.
help
Right.
pay the mortgage and the bills and and not have the brutal swings that the market can throw at you, right?
Yeah. So
So
what was the timeline of this real quick, Ronch? So you finished school, you're at this first place. How long were you there before you potentially moved, to doing stuff with the CBOE in Chicago?
so I graduated I graduated college in 89, and I was, by the time 92 came around, I was a retail broker.
Okay. So, but now these are different companies though, right? Like, so you started with the
So
one that you had
I started
said,
with Oldie, OLDE, Oldie
yeah,
Disc.
oldie.
So after Oldie, like I said, I had an opportunity to go to Chicago. It was, it was unilaterally rejected
Right.
in my world at the time, right?
Sure. Sure.
So that forced me, like I said, back into a regular 9 to 5. So I left the retail brokerage world because the hours were extremely painful. The work was extremely painful and unrewarding, not from a monetary standpoint, from a satisfaction standpoint, right?
Okay.
If I've got to pick up the phone and call you at dinner time and say, Joe, you don't know me, and I'm a really good broker, and I want you to give me your net worth or $500,000 to put in an account. Let's open an account and start a relationship together. How well is that
No.
received generally, right?
No, not good. I mean, you're basically. I mean, for the easiest reference for most people is just thinking about Wolf of Wall Street, Jordan Belfort calling people up. I
Yes.
brought it up with when I was talking to Jay. I was like, Aerotime Technologies, some random company out of somebody's garage. But you're
Right.
right; like you don't have that trust built up, so that's why you were making such a volume of dials every day. Right? That's why they
It's
give you 300 is because you're probably going to land what one out of
yeah,
that
and
300
and
dial.
yeah, and the way that world worked, what was so frustrating about it, and what I went through in that environment was, they moved the cheese, not
Right.
several times, right? Like when I got hired, it was like, here's what you have to achieve to get to the next level, and it was like, okay, you come in, you make your 300 dials a day. After 3 months, you get to take your Series 7 exam. By the way, if you fail your Series 7 exam, you are fired. Like, don't even come back to the office. It's over. You're done. Um, and if at the end of that, you've got to, and I don't remember how much it was. You've got to raise, I don't remember the numbers. You got to raise X number of dollars for your quote unquote senior broker in commission dollars. Like you're basically there as free labor for them. You know what I mean? And at
Right.
the end of the month, depending upon your production for them, they gave you a share of commissions. And my senior broker, was a massive, cheap asshole that treated me like shit on the bottom of his shoe. And even when I was doing well and he had nice commissions, he just treated me like a cheap motherfucker. And it made me so bitter and resentful. And I was just like, I'm just here as your lackey, and I've got to hit this number so that I can get out from underneath how much of a freaking Nazi you are. You know what I mean? It was just awful. And then once you reached the next level, and you finally got out from underneath, then you could get your own book. But you had to reach a certain level that you gave to the senior broker. So I was the one making the calls and making the relationships. And then after a certain time, when I finally met my numbers and could be cut loose to be my own broker, I didn't get to keep any of what I gave to the senior broker. I had to start all over ground zero from nothing. And then what happens is, hey, after 3 months, you should be at this level of commission. And if you're not, we got to put you on a plan. And after 6 months, you need to be at this level of commission. If you're not, we got to put you on a plan. And after 12 months, you got to be at this level. And if you're not, we got to put you on a plan. You know what I mean? So it was constant, just getting, shelled. And that's where the whole thing came back. I was just like, I was like, this job sucks. I was like, this is not finance. This is not stocks. This is being a freaking door-to-door vacuum sales cleaner guy, but worse, they fucking hate me, right? Like I literally had, when you would call, I literally had guys that would tell me, and this happened maybe once or twice, but literally told me to buy 1,000 shares of shove it up my ass, right? Like that's not fun. That's not a rewarding job. That's just like, I got to go home.
They're just building character, Ronch. That's all they're doing. They're just trying to build your character up.
I mean, it's, I use a lot of, I obviously, you hear me in the room. I've got a lot of attitude, and you know what I mean? I'm not afraid to speak my mind and push back on people. I think a majority of that came from that initial experience, because I had to learn very quickly when people were rude and terse with you on the phone, how to push back in a way that either disarmed them or pissed them off and they hung up on you. There was no in between. And the majority is hang up on you. And it's very difficult to sit there and convince yourself of, okay, good, now I can move on to the next one. Because right? It's like, how much ass kicking can I take before somebody finally says yes? And it's far and few between, and it's not rewarding. It's not healthy for anyone to be in that environment. Sure. It's just like, fucking, this sucks,
Right. So that was kind of like your, I'm done. Like you had said, like this is not what I signed up for. I'm done being a lackey. I want to move in a different direction. Now you still had the passion, obviously, for finance space or trading or whatever you want to call it. But
I always had the passion for
right.
for quote unquote investing. But for me, it's more than just, let's just buy and hold. I'm like, I need to understand how this works, and I know that there's a way in here to make a lot of money without having to be a senior level executive or the traditional 9-to-5 route to fame and fortune, right? The people that have the most from a standpoint of assets, money, et cetera, are typically entrepreneurs or people who have built their own wealth, whether that's like real estate, franchises, or some guy started a chip business, whatever. You know what I mean? Those are typically the people that make the huge money. Now, I don't think I'm somebody who is going to fit that, but at the same time, I'm like, I know that I'm not going to be somebody who's going to rise to a C-level position within a company, nor do I want to. And that takes just as much effort, skill, education, politics, et cetera, to get to. And it's the higher you climb, the steeper that pyramid becomes. There's only one CEO position per company, right? Like, good luck. You know what I mean? You might be that person, and if you are, that's great. And you're probably somebody who did really well through the traditional environment and does have the right pedigree and did come up through the right circumstances and worked hard and got into good schools. And I'm not saying that that's like, just bestowed and handed down. I think it's it's an impressive accomplishment. It takes the right kind of person. But I wanted to be able to, how do I make the same kind of money that person does without having to go through the same shit? Right.
Right. So what does that lead to? Right. So now you're done with this, you go back to the 9-to-5. Like, how do we go from, leaving that type of business, going to something else, and then essentially becoming, what we'll call, for those that don't know who you are, a successful trader, right?
Again, so I never taken my eye off of the ball from a trading standpoint, and always stayed involved in some way, shape, or form. And even while I was working my other jobs, and by the way, I spent some time in technical recruiting, and I spent some time in
Okay.
medical device sales. So those were kind of my nice, the good 9 to 5 environments, right? So out of retail brokerage and into, for lack of a better way of saying it, was because I couldn't go and pursue the trading route, I had to find something that was at least going to allow me to come home at the end of the night and not feel like a piece of shit, right? And not something that kept me at my desk from 6:30 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. That's just not sustainable. It's not,
Right.
it's, you know what I mean? That's not even a normal existence, because literally that's, you get up, you go to work, you come home, you go to bed, you rinse, repeat, right? And I know that that's a reality in a lot of places and in a lot of people's lives, but I didn't want that, right? I didn't
Right.
want that. So in the recruiting world, I was around when the IT boom was happening. So a lot of what happens, I think, in environments is, if you happen to be in the right place at the right time, is also a very positive thing. And if you are, you hopefully you recognize it and you take advantage of it, right? Like I was around in the time when um, Sun Microsystems was going nuts, when Oracle was going nuts, 3Com was you know what I mean? Like all of these companies. And I just remember looking around and I was like, holy shit, look at these guys that are showing up at these companies are getting all of these options. And then when these companies go public, all of a sudden it's like, damn, you're cashing checks for $500,000, or you're cashing checks for
Yeah.
5 million. Like, how the fuck? You know what I mean? I'm like, why am I, again, same thing. I was like, why am I on this side of the desk finding talent to fill the chairs to watch these guys cash huge checks? You know what I mean? So again, same thing. I
Right.
was like, fuck this. And so my transition into medical device was more because I was like, you know what? I'm going to make a lot more money in medical device than I am in IT recruiting, simply because when a hospital buys, something for $1 million, the commission on that for a
Oh
sales rep
yeah.
is huge, right? Those jobs are not easy to come by. I think my background in the ability to handle so much cold calling
I was
and
gonna say that you did 300 dials a day. I think you
yeah,
could probably have learned a little bit about the sales game, especially doing
exactly,
med
it kind
device
of fit,
sales.
right? Like the only thing that anybody ever had reservations was you don't have a background in medical. We don't know that you're going to be able to deal with this. So, it was like, we'll put you through. I went through one training program, and it kind of a similar thing, and I was already used to it. Was like, hey, you've got to learn. We're going to give you a test, and you're going to come to this training. It's 3 weeks of training. And before you walk in the door, you're going to get a test on anatomy. And basically, the test on anatomy was they give you a blank well, not a blank piece of paper, but a piece of paper with a skeleton. And it's like, fucking name the bones, right? So you got to spit out the 200 and
There's the
whatever
femur.
you got, exactly. And like, here's the fucking hemate. And you know what I mean? Like, you got to know it all. So it's like, all right, well, I know how to study that stuff and spit it out. I know how to do that from my Series 7 days. I learned how to do it in college. It was just like data in, dump the data, get through it,
Sure.
and move to the, you know what I mean? Like, give me the next challenge. Like, that I can do. So, and I had a genuine interest in it because I was like, if I'm going to sell something, I want to sell something that benefits somebody. Therefore, I'll be able to be more passionate about it. Right.
Right. And
If
while
I
you're
sell,
doing that, sorry, go ahead, Ranch.
I was just going to say, like, if I sell you a car, who gives a fuck? Do you know what I mean? But if I sell a hospital, something that's going to keep you or your loved one alive, prolong your life, make the
Yeah.
quality of your life better, I feel better about that than
Right.
selling you some fucking Chrysler 300 or whatever piece of shit car. You know what I
You
mean?
didn't want to be a Honda Civic salesman?
No.
So while you're doing all this med device stuff, right? Like, were
Yeah.
you trading or investing on the side, or like
So
because
that
obviously you said
was,
you never lost, the eye of the, or the apple was always in your eye, right? Like you're
yeah.
still trying to get to this. So what were you doing back then?
Well, so that was a huge key for me, because in outside sales capacity, I'm not in an office 9 to 5, right? So there's nobody looking over my shoulder. So in between calls, I'm always checking in, and I'm looking at how are my investments doing, and obviously in that point in time, you're a you don't have a choice to be anything other than a swing or a longer term trader, because you can't sit at a desk and day trade, right? I think
Sure.
we
And
have,
at the time, do they have options? So like, what
yeah.
timeline was this? Was this like,
Well,
because options trading wasn't like super electronic for a long time, right?
let me first of all, let me back up and give you the background for me, and not just I was going to move to Chicago and become a trader on a floor. So back in when was 2011? That was 2001, right?
Yeah.
So
9/11.
I was still actively trading, and I had collected a group of people. And I had originally learned, when I was a retail broker, I had originally learned what options were, obviously from taking the Series 7 exam. And there was somebody in our office who was the same age as I was, and I think had a small account. Maybe it was like a five or a $10,000 account, something like that. Bought lotto options on Micron in front of earnings, and earnings were good, and the stock popped, and he cashed out his options for 75 grand in 1991 or 2, or whenever that was. That was a lot of fucking money,
Yeah.
especially somebody in their mid 20s, right? I was like, holy shit. Like the next thing you know, he's like pulling up in a new car. We're over at his house, and the refrigerator's stocked with beers, and there's girls hanging out at the house. I was like, oh man, it's a whole nother level, right? So um, I was looking at that like, okay, I've got to use options because I don't have enough capital to buy 1,000 shares of Micron, or
Right. You want leverage for less of a cost.
yeah. I was like, I have to find a way to make this work. So going into 9/11, I had convinced a handful of people to throw money in a pot, right? And I was running this pot, and I had built it up at the time to a very significant level. So we started with a couple, I don't remember what it was, a couple $100,000, something like that. We built, I'm trying to remember how much was in there to start. Somewhere between 150 and 200K, somewhere in that range. And I
Okay.
built it up to like almost $2 million. And 9/11 came, and I was loaded with call options in 3Com, and I forget the other names I was in at the time. The one that sticks out the most was 3Com. And 9/11 happened, and the market got closed for what, 5 consecutive trading days. And when they opened the market back up, the market opened and basically erased 2 years worth of gains on that day. So I obliterated $1.6 million.
My God.
Oof, it was just gone.
Wow.
Just gone. So the people that were involved obviously don't speak to me anymore. And that was
I
a
mean, how did you know that was gonna? You didn't know it was gonna happen. Nobody did, right?
no,
But
but this is
that's
this is
that's
what
that's tough.
this is what led. And I was talking today with you and Norse about, I read something online. It was on Twitter, and it was there's a Twitter handle out there called, I think it's is it Guru Leaks,
Guru
or
leaks. Yeah, I know what you're
Guru
talking
Leaks?
about.
And basically what they're doing, and I don't blame them, they're basically looking for bad actors, right? They're looking for people who are gonna be like, hey, pay me money and I'll give you stock advice, right? And There are some bad actors out there for sure. I think that a lot of us try really hard not to be bad actors. But one of the quotes that I saw on there today was they were picking on some guy who has like a $50 a month Discord. First of all, if you pay for a $50 a month Discord, it's only $50. Like, you know
Right.
what I mean? Like, so what? And if it's not working for you, you just stop paying the $50 and you move on, right? Like nobody's like stealing your house. You know what I mean? So the thing was that they called him out for a really bad call on Target, and I was like, well, it's nothing like what happened on 9/11, but it's similar in regard to a catalyst event happened,
Right.
and the next thing you know, the valuation changed from being something that was up here to something that's way down here, right? You can't see something like that coming. You can't see something like a 9/11 coming. Like a 9/11 is what we would refer to as a black swan event, right? So if you get caught in a black swan event, you blow up. It happens. And then I remember reading on that quote was from Guru Leaks was somebody out there said the best, and it was from a pro in the industry, was the best way to tell if somebody's going to blow up is if they've blown up before. It's like, well, that can happen to anybody. You know what I mean?
Happened to Sailor, right? Michael
Well,
Sailor blew up and blew a shit ton of money, and now look at him with MSTR.
Well, and you know what I mean. We don't know. He could again see. It could, this saying could actually be true. You could see him blow up again, right?
Oh, 100%.
So
Absolutely.
I had to learn from the road rash that I had been dealt unknowingly to kind of go out and figure out, how do I keep that from happening again? Can I recover from this? And you know, from a personal standpoint, it was horrible, right? Like that was the beginning of the end of my marriage, and you know, it put a ton of stress and pressure. And
Oh
you know,
man, I can only imagine.
and I had to live with that. That was my fault. It was my doing. You know, and that's when you hear the things from people that you are around, like, I told you weren't good enough to do this, right? I told you weren't smart enough to do this. This happened because you don't know what you're doing, right? You don't have what you're supposed to have to be able to do this. And to be quite honest, the people that do have all of those backgrounds and are smart, guess what? They don't get it right all of the time either. And when those
No.
people blow up, they blow up really hard also. So I don't think that necessarily holds water, right? But what it
Right.
did teach me was I have to find a way to still use the vehicle that I like to use, but how do I do it in a way that allows me maneuverability? If I get it wrong, how do I fix it? If something from out of the blue happens, how do I protect myself? And there is no perfect answer. There are a lot of really good answers and a lot of answers that work really, really well. And we've proven that over the years. And it doesn't happen often. I know people say, don't use the word pandemic, that's cringy, but that's what happened, right? So when that
Right.
happens, like, we had protection, we were protected going into that event. And if you're wondering, you know, how we do it, that's what I spent a decade trying to figure out. And over that time frame, and I know I'm taking again a very circuitous route. I'm ADHD. Sorry, you're going to
No,
have
it's
to.
okay. This is great, Ronch. Keep going.
But it, you know, the the ability for me when I was working in med device to find a mentor and to always I knew that this was something I was going to do because I'd never been able to let it go, to never back away, always interested, always reading, always looking for ways to apply, you know, what I've learned to get to that spot that I have always been trying to get to, which is, if I trade my time for money, I want it to be enough so that when I want my time on my terms, I can do it. And people who work in a 9 to 5 environment or a corporate environment, it's very difficult to break free from that. And it's also very difficult to rise to levels to where you can have the assets to leverage your time. And even times when people reach those heights from a monetary standpoint, they're still beholden in a big way to the responsibility of the office that they hold, right?
Right.
You don't just get the money and then you're not just able to just like check out and be like, oh, cool, I'm going to take fucking 6 weeks off and, good luck. I hope the stock price holds up while I'm gone. That doesn't happen, right?
No.
So during that time frame, I went on a search for methods, for mentors, for ways to do it, and it took a long time. Like today, we were talking a little bit about like, and you all, and a lot of people that are involved in the room know that I use technical analysis as a part of my way to approach whether something is giving me probability for success or not. And it's a very delicate balance of technicals, because we all know that technicals are only as good as in the areas where we see opportunity. Does it work? And is it confirmed by other things we look for? We look for sentiment. We look for unusual option activity. We look for changes in level 2. Is there a big buyer here? Is there a big seller here? It's not it's not hard. It's not complicated, but it is not easy to do, because it's like muscle memory, like golf, right? You're not going to be good at golf unless you learn the mechanics of the swing and how to move your body. Well, it takes a while to connect all of those things together, right? And if you look at somebody like Tiger Woods, he's still practicing, right? He's still trying to figure it out. So it's very similar, in my opinion, in what we do. You don't strive or look for perfection. You look for, where do I have the best probability? And I need somebody in some way to either teach me how to do it or lead me to a way where I can figure out how to put that together. And for me, I would say over a decade ago, maybe 15 years now, I finally found a mentor who was a market maker. And I paid for his tutelage, and he taught me the basics of what I know today, which was kind of like, all right, that's great that you have your Series 7 and your 8 and your 24 and all that. He's like, that means nothing. He's like, we got to fucking start over, and you need to understand, what is an option? How does it work? Do you understand that a call can be a put and a put can be a call? And we can we can synthesize stock with the use of options. Like all of these things, here are the Greeks. Here's how the Greeks work. Here's why they're important. Here is, this is what vol is, and how vol works. And here's where you have advantages and don't have advantages. And, here's where you're going to be too far out of the money on a trade. Here's where you're going to be too far in the money on a trade with the wrong period of time. Like there's a lot to learn if you don't have somebody who at least can give you some guidance, right?
Right.
That's where I had the advantage of not being in an office 9 to 5, but still working 9 to 5 without it disrupting my performance as that individual, because I always performed well in that world. And I was also lucky enough to be in spots where companies that I worked for got acquired. And when you have stock in companies that get acquired, it gives you a financial boost, right?
Yep.
And if you're lucky enough to be in the right place at the right time, those boosts can be big. And I couldn't do it in the tech world because I didn't have that tech background. But in medical device, especially in the sales realm, you're in the right place at the right time, and you get, you perform well and you have stock and somebody buys your company, you get a check. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
all of those things, and it's place and time. There's always some luck involved. Don't ever let somebody
For sure.
tell you that luck isn't a part of it. I've always found that luck shows up in places and times when you've been working hard at something, and the reason that the luck shows up is because you've been concentrated in that spot doing whatever it is that you're doing, and one day those all of those pieces come together. But they wouldn't come together if you're just stumbling around drunk in a room with the lights off. You know what I mean?
Right, right. Yeah, it's interesting you say that too, because I've always had the same inclination, at least with luck, for a lot of things. I mean, little side note here, but when I got my start in the video game industry, and everyone was trying to get into it at the time. It was like the hot ticket, right? You had
Yep.
Robert Kraft buying a team, right? The Patriots owner. You had all these big fish, and I happened to, again, I had a good resume and I knew what I was doing, but I got lucky that the person that was interviewing for this position was looking at every single resume that got submitted. He looked at like 2,000 resumes, didn't use any type of piece of software to look at. He parsed it. That's lucky, right? To me, that's lucky that was the type of person that was hiring for the role, right? I did the work to get there, but still luck, right? So
Yeah.
I can totally understand where you're coming from on that. So this journey that you kind of went on, so you've learned a lot from these different places that you've kind of worked at, right? Like how to be basically a minion, 300 dials a day gives you that confidence to do a lot of the sales stuff. You have that blow up, that you're talking about on 9/11, but you also have the job flexibility to continue like building your knowledge. But what I wanted to know too is, you spoke about this mentor of yours, right? Like you find out like, hey, I've had this blow up. I have the flexibility. I really want to learn how to manage risk and all these different pieces. How did you find that person? Oh, there
Well,
goes the smoke alarm.
I
Hold
mean,
on.
yeah, no worries.
It's just air fryer. So this is great. I'm probably not going to even edit this. This is probably going to go in there. My girlfriend and her sister apparently don't know how to use an air fryer to make chicken nuggets. So the fire alarm is going off. But anyway, sorry, Ranch. Go ahead and
I'm not coming to your house to eat.
yeah. Go ahead and continue. You're talking about how you met your mentor.
Yeah. So first of all, let me set the stage and give you
Yeah.
a world of where I was in a mental and financial capacity during that time. There they go again.
I'm just gonna mute when I'm not talking until this is
Pull it,
figured out.
pull
But
it
you
off the
just keep
wall and get
going
the
around.
battery
Yeah,
out.
right.
You got to get the battery out, man. That thing's not going to stop.
Just keep going. Sorry.
All right. So this is where I was that first of all, I told you about the shellacking, right? The huge loss. Now I had tried during that time unsuccessfully over a period of time to make my way back financially. And it's very difficult in that environment to not only blow up, but to blow up other people's money, to blow up your own money, and to put a serious weight on my relationship at the time. Ultimately, what wound up happening was in 2008, when the financial crisis showed up, was another period where I had a big amount of unfortunate luck and some good luck. The unfortunate piece of luck that was where my first marriage came undone. So the good that came out of it was that I was on the sidelines because I was going through that financially when the financial crisis hit. So I didn't get wiped out a second time
Wow.
because I was on the sideline going through this event. Now, the thing that I didn't know when I went through this event of a divorce was just how badly it would impact my kids and how badly it would impact me. Because when a family, comes under, I went through it as a kid, and it was bad. And I remember what it was like as a kid, but I didn't realize how badly it would impact me as a father and as an individual. Like everything was, I lost everything, right? So I lost I lost my house. I lost, 401k. I lost my fucking dignity. I lost, moving to an area that was ungodly expensive, having roommates as a grown man with two children that were,
Wow.
6 and 8, renting a room in a house with three other people who were younger than me, fucking crying myself to sleep every night for 2 years. Like, it was not a pretty picture, right? Like, I found myself in debt. I had to scrape myself out of debt. It took me freaking 2.5 or 3 years to save $5,000. Right. That's a fucking
Wow.
eternity to scrape 5 grand together from where I'd come from to where I was at. Right. That was the most painful part. And I think from my background as an athlete and being in the Marine Corps when I was younger helped me just to like put blinders on and just be like, dude, you just got to trust in yourself and just keep moving and working on all of this so that you're not here, right? It served as a reminder that this is a place where I'm at that I never, ever, ever want to be in ever again, right? Because I can't imagine going through that again. It was horrible at the time. So, and everybody has a similar type of experience or story, and whether that's divorce or some type of family illness or whatever it might be. It teaches you a couple of things. One is empathy, and the other thing it teaches you is like you've also got to have a really, really hard exterior to get through a time like that, right? Like, you've just got to be able to shut it off during the time that you're supposed to be working and productive, and then you can go and break down in the times when you're not. And then when you reach a certain point where you're sick of yourself breaking down, right? You just find a way to get through it. So my way to get through it was to focus on my job, my kids whenever I had them,
Sure.
and then to figure out this piece of the market so that I could again find that pathway to how do I get to a place in time where I don't have to trade my time for money so that I can use my time in the way that I want to use it, right? So I went through like every kind of technical analysis class, options class, everything that I could that I saw, like the online trading academy, like all of these things, right? Like, learn Ichimoku Cloud, learn fucking Bollinger Bands, learn like all of this stuff. And it was, what was interesting about it was, for me, I had to learn, I had to go, for whatever reason, I had to go through this path and learn all of these things so that I could look at it and be like, no, fuck, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. No, that doesn't work. You know what I mean? To get through that. And then finally, I think it was, and I don't remember how, I think it was just kind of dumb luck that I stumbled onto my mentor online. It was either looking at like, YouTube videos or maybe just poking around on the internet. I don't remember the exact way that I found
Sure.
my mentor, but what was appealing about it to me was that he was, first of all, he was a market maker. He was a market maker on the Philadelphia Exchange, and his book was Apple and Dell, and there were a couple other names, and he was like one of the biggest. He was like one of the biggest market makers in those names during those times, which was when all of the tech names were going absolutely berserk, right? So it was like in the 2000s that the early 2000s that he was a market maker. So he was taking students. He only took a handful of students. Obviously, we had to pay him. And again, it was the same thing. I was like, I've been through all of these different things. This to me seems unique because the guy is a market maker, right? I was like, I'm going to at least put some money into this and see how this works. So I put some money into it. And what he started teaching was like an extension of what I had already learned as a retail broker, but in a way that took what I learned from the test taking education to, oh shit, here's how you actually apply those methods and techniques. And here's why you do it, and here's how you do it. So I spent a good solid 3 years learning from him, and my $5,000 went into what I teach today is basic is a very similar setup to what I learned from him, but I've taken it to a different level, and it's because of the other stuff that I've learned in our room, right? Like for how to read tape, what is unusual option flow, how do we use that? How do I take these technical things and combine all of this stuff together and then apply it to how I'm going to trade it? So for example, like the first time I learned how to use a condor was from my mentor, but he never taught me, nor did he know at the time how to take a condor and use it as an offensive weapon, right? It was always taught that a condor is a very stable premium collection,
Right.
nice and calm. But what became apparent to me through that whole process was something like, well, hey, listen, if I've got a stock that's stuck in a period of consolidation, and somewhere I think it's going to break that level, that area of concentration, or that level of consolidation, and I don't know which direction it's going to pick, whether it's up or down, I can use a condor, and all I have to do is convert one leg of that condor to make it a directional trade. And by the way, when it works and something does break its consolidation, the payoff is typically fucking huge. And
Right.
if it doesn't break that consolidation, it doesn't matter, because you still collect the premium on the condor until such a time and place that it does break that consolidation. And if it takes a period of, let's say, 6 months or a year, well, all of the money that you collect from premium all of a sudden becomes a risk-free trade for you to catch that direction when and if that stock breaks out of its consolidation. So that's something that I wasn't taught, but it was something, because of the things I was taught, I was able to figure out and apply, right?
And
So
make it into your own thing, like you said, like make it
yeah,
into your own strategy, taking what you learn. So
yep,
you did this through, you go through '08, right?
yep,
Heartbreaking time, very
yep,
tough, right? Doing all of that. And then you start getting, like mentorship, right? 3 years
yep.
of doing all this and doing anything. What was kind of like the tipping point then, right? Because at this point, still you're still doing what, med device at this time, or you work in a different type of
Yeah,
job?
mid device. So for me, I understood two things as far as from an investing standpoint. I understood tech companies and I understood medical device companies. And once I learned how to take that 5 grand that I had and put it into something where it could make some kind of a meaningful change, was to go into the options world, learn how to use the leap strategy. And I couldn't trade on a day-to-day basis, right? So I had to put it into leaps. 5 grand, you don't get to pick a lot of different names. You get to pick one name. So you got to find one that's going to work, and you ultimately you don't know if they're going to work, right? So the money goes into a leap, and over a 2 year period, the name that I was in worked, and I was able to grow the 5 grand and get myself back to over 25K, and get out of the penalty box of being a pattern day trader. And it allowed me the flexibility to take more risk and add more risk. So it was a very slow process. And then again, the same thing along the way was like that whole, how do you avoid the unforeseen black swan event? Now, outside of a nuclear exchange, you're the the way that I do it is to combine certain things. But ultimately, what winds up happening is you're buying some protection against your long-term portfolio in the form of SPY Q or diamond puts, right? They're disaster puts. It's an insurance policy. You don't ever expect to cash them in. What you do know is that if the unforeseen happens, that the explosion in volatility in those puts that you've purchased is what's going to bail you out of a really bad situation. It's going to bail you out of a situation that happened in 2008. It's going to bail you out of a situation that happened in the 9/11 tragedy, right? That's what those things are for, and that is how, from a long-term perspective, when I hear, circling back to somebody saying an indication that somebody is going to blow up is because they've blown up in the past. Well, how am I going to be the guy that doesn't repeat that? And that's what I learned how to do. That's what I
Break
learned
the
how to do.
cycle, right? Break the
Yeah.
cycle. But almost to your point of what you said earlier, you learn a lot from blowups, right? And a lot of most people that actually become successful at this do have a story of blowing up, if not once, multiple times. I mean, I know Lucci does. Jay has Jay's a unique person, but I know he's had a couple of blowups in his career as well. So it's just interesting. What I did not know about you is because I've taken your course, right? I know about leaps, iron condors. Condors is like my favorite freaking trade because I love collecting premium, and then you have that direction move like you
Yep.
talked about. But what I didn't realize was kind of the backstory and how that has shaped your strategy and how you look at the markets themselves, right? Like I I have no idea when I'm taking this course. I'm just learning this information, but the journey basically brought you to this strategy in some capacity, right? Like you've made it your own for sure.
Yep.
But like the blowups and all those tough times, those different parts have kind of been like, yeah, now I know how to put myself in a position where I have a high percentage of winning.
Yep.
And if something does go wrong, I'm positioned in a way where I can make either the most of the opportunity or I'm not going to get burned that bad.
Right. Yep. That's the whole key. And that's when I teach what I teach and bring it, to everyone. There's always, everybody has a little seed of doubt, and I can never go to somebody and say you need to put all of your blind faith in what I teach you. And you would be, as a trader, you're supposed to be cynical. You would be foolish to do that to begin with, right?
Right.
But to your point, knowing what I've been through and what I'm bringing to you and everybody else in the room is for the reason of me wanting to make sure that people don't have to go through the same shit that I went through. If I can cut that cancer out of your life and somebody else's life and just have you bypass that, then I feel like I've done a good service to you and to everybody else. It doesn't mean that if you take our course or my course, that it's going to work for you and you're going to be this happy guy with all this fucking money, right? That's not the point.
Right.
The point is to teach everybody that comes in that there are ways for you to make this work and adapt it to whatever your world is. Now, if you are somebody that does work 9 to 5, it's going to be really hard, right? If you have flexibility in your 9 to 5, you can make it work. Your time frame needs to be different, and the way you approach things needs to be different. You don't get to come in here and sit down at the desk and scalp with all of us, right?
Right.
You will learn enough where you can apply it to whatever time frame fits your individual work world, right? In a way that's not gonna that is gonna throw you off kilter. Now, the part that I can't control is what somebody does with the information when they leave, right? Because we teach people how to fish. We don't give them direction on what they should or shouldn't do. And that to me is a big difference. We'll never be a service where we say, oh, we're Target, that's blowing up, and we're buying Target today, and you should too. Like, we'll never be those guys, never. But what we will do is say, here's the experience that we've had, here's the situation, and here's what we would apply in this situation for these reasons. And then it's up to you to understand those methods and apply those methods in those environments, fully knowing that it might not work, but you're in the best area of probability for those things to work. And if they don't, you're getting out at what we talked about earlier is either break even or very, very small loss, so that you can stick around for the next opportunity for it to work. Right.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's also why, for those that haven't actually been in the room, Ron doesn't have a filter at all in the room. Like any, I mean, just like Lucci. I mean, if you're being what we call, a herb, or another word for that is an idiot, you're going to get called an idiot. And I think a lot of that is, now kind of hearing the story is not, you're not trying to be condescending to anybody. You're, like you said, you're trying to stop them from making a mistake where they could have a potential blow up. And to your point too, everyone has a different trading style. Everyone does different things, across the board. Like, we have people in there that are purely scalpers of, SPX, and others that are just doing long-term trading. But like, the psychology and having the protection is something that everybody can, gravitate towards or understand when they're trading. And a lot of what you're saying to most of these times, these people, is be like, all right, well, walk me through, explain to me why you're doing this. If I can understand why you're doing it, okay, yeah, I might not agree with you on some level, but at least you have a logical, sound way of thinking about it, and you've learned something from me to actually, execute this trade with a certainty of confidence, right? Like, because a lot of this is just internal confidence of what you think is going to happen. No one knows what's going to happen. Nobody knows what NVIDIA earnings is going to be. I mean, yeah, inside traders that are positioning know, of course, but yeah, Nancy knows that. That's a conversation for another day. But it's interesting how I can now tie all this together. Hearing this from you. But what I want to do is take a little step back from the trading style and everything that you kind of have, and these different things that we do in the room. But how did you actually get into the room too? Right. So you go through this mentorship. You're still working. At some point, you do this full time, and that's before you even get into the steam room, right? Before you even meet Lucci and the guys. So, like, walk me through like that part of the journey.
I wanted to find a live trading room, and there were and there still are a lot of live trading rooms, and I wanted to go into one where I didn't want a course shoved down my throat. I was just looking for a trading room, right?
Yeah, you want to trade with other people.
A lot of, and we do the same thing, by the way, is when you come in to our room, if you don't know what you're talking about, the first thing that's going to come out of my mouth is, if you want to be on the same wavelength as me or some of the other guys, I suggest you take the course. But what we don't do is say, if you're going to come into the room, you have to take the course. Do you know what I mean? There's a lot of chat rooms that do that, right? Like, you need to take my course because all I talk about is Ichimoku Cloud or whatever. You know what I mean? So, or I forget what the other one is. And this one I still, for the life of me, I can't figure out. I think Delta Dave likes this one, and I know Katie does, is whatever the fucking matrix sequence with the numbers and the X's and the O's, and I don't even fucking call that.
Yeah. I don't know
figure charts or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a point chart. I don't understand the X's and O's one either. I know that, like, I'll look at like time, price, opportunity, which is a little bit different, but yeah, the X's and O's, I couldn't tell you what any of that means. It's not
and there's
for me.
Exactly. I'm too ADHD for that. I don't get it.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of rooms out there, and there are a lot of serious traders that do that and do it really, really well. And I'm not one of them. Like, I'm a visual guy. Give me lines and colors and visuals that make sense to me and how my brain can process it. Right. And
Right.
that's ultimately what I try to spit out there. And I kept going through these different rooms. I don't remember. It was just by looking online and, hey, I'll try this room. I'll try this room. And I just kept trying different rooms. And I showed up here one day in the steam
And you're
room.
full time trading at this point too, Ron. Like
No,
you
no,
moved. No,
this
you're
was
not.
still
This is still
right.
okay.
And the reason was because I was looking for I was looking to take what I had learned to another level. You always say the next level. I'm like, well, okay, I want it to get better. It's really good. It's really solid. There's still some stuff missing. What is it? How do I get there? Right? Because I was still struggling with, and I think one of the missing pieces that my mentor couldn't put together was he only used technical levels as entries and exits. And as I was going through trading, there would be plenty of times where technical analysis wasn't enough. It doesn't work all of the time. And it's still true today, right? You can't just use technical analysis. Well, I came across what was, again, in the chat rooms, was like, here's unusual option activity and, tape reading. I was like, what the fuck is that? Like, I've been around for a long time. I've been mentored by a market maker. I don't know what unusual option activity, and I don't know what reading tape is. Like, how could I have missed that? You know what I mean? But I said the same thing about, like, oh, what's this Ichimoku cloud and Bollinger Bands are cool. You know what I mean? So I was like, all right, is this another one of these waste of my fucking time things? And so I got into the steam room and started seeing how the flow works, right? How does the unusual option activity work? And using it in combination with what I had learned from my market maker, I was like, oh, I have an edge. All of a sudden I have an edge, because if I see technicals and I see unusual option activity, I have an edge, right? You still see me use that today. So I use other things in combination with that now as my game has evolved over time. But that was like a light bulb moment for me, right? Where I was like, oh shit, like there's an edge here. And also when I got into the room, I also thought that unusual option activity was the freaking fountain of youth, right? Like I was like, oh, all I have to do is wait for these guys to show up and buy it. Oh, and now that I think of this, there's there was a trader out there who worked on the SIBO, and I don't know if he's still doing, a chat room or whatever. His name is Andrew Keene. And I remember getting into his room, and that's where I first heard of unusual option activity. And I was in his room for a little bit, and I found him to be kind of a douche. So it was, he kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And a lot of guys, I think, built credibility based off of, oh, I have this room and I also go on CNBC. And I was like, I don't give a fuck if you go on CNBC. All I care about is this shit working or not? Like, I don't care where you go in your free time, but
Are you helping me or are you not helping me? I don't give two shits how much
it's
you're
like,
sitting there talking with Jim
exactly.
Cramer every day.
Exactly. And I was like, are you paying to go on CNBC? Are you getting paid to get on CNBC? I was like, I didn't understand how it worked. I was like, all I knew is I was like, that's too much attention for me to deal with and to pay you to be in, your room, and you're going to freaking, like, I'm like, I don't like this. You know what I mean? So I was looking, but I did like the unusual option activity. And I think concurrently, the steam room came up, and then obviously coming over to the steam room was not, hey, we're on CNBC. It was not, hey, we're pumping this name. It was not, hey, XYZ is this is the one that we're focused on to, you know what I mean? It was none of that. It was, here's unusual option activity. And people in the room were like, oh yeah, I like that one. I'm playing that one. And then other people were like, I don't like that in that spot. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, this is actually an open environment where people are talking about what they're trading and why they're trading it. And here's this unusual option activity. And here I've got these methods and technical analysis that I've learned over all these years, and I'm applying it. It's working for me. And then it was never advertised, but the master course internally was like once a year, once every couple of, twice a, it was once a year, twice a year. And they'd always do this push for the course. And I was like, fuck you. I'm not like, stop it. I'm not taking another class. Like, I was like, don't waste my time. And I don't remember. Oh, now I do remember. There was, I hung around long enough and people in the room kept talking about how good the course was and the material was, and talking about understanding and learning how to read level 2. I still didn't. I was like, you can't read level 2. I was like, get the fuck out of here. Like that's not a thing.
Moves
right?
too fucking quick. That's bullshit.
I was like, I was like, fuck you. It doesn't work. I was like, there's no way. So there was a write us. There was a scholarship. Write us a reason, an essay why you should be given a scholarship. So I wrote a letter. I don't know who got chosen, but I didn't get chosen, but they responded back to me like, we liked your letter, da 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 da. And it was Charlie. And I don't know. He threw in some kind of words of encouragement. Maybe I have the email from whenever it was. And then
should frame that. The rejection of the scholarship from the Steamroom. To educator of the Steamroom. What a journey.
you know how Charlie is. Charlie will he'll let you down, and at the same time give you enough encouragement to not keep your head down.
Eloquent.
Coming back,
very
right?
Eloquent.
So I was like, fuck, all right, fine. So I think it was the next time the master course came around, I was like, all right. I don't remember what it cost. It was like, $1,500, $3,000. I don't remember what it was. $3,000, something like that.
Yeah, it was a couple grand back in the day when they did it, especially with live with Lucci. It was always more expensive back then.
But the thing that got me on it was I had been around for a couple of years, and they, at the time, what they were doing was they were grandfathering you for life, right? Nobody does that. We don't even do it anymore. But nobody was doing that. I was like, if these guys are saying, if I put my money in and I don't get it, if I don't figure out what they're doing the first time around, the next time they run a class, I'm welcome to come back to the next class. I did that for like 3 years in a row to learn how to read fucking tape, because that shit's hard.
Yeah, really hard.
It's really hard. And I'm not the kind of person that understands that right away. If you've got a, if you're a pattern person, or you're an engineer, or somebody who's good at sequencing, or puzzling, or playing like, those are the kind of people that look at tape and it takes them 3 months and they got it. You know what I mean? Or shorter. I'm the kind of person that is like,
and shit scrolling. There's different colors, there's numbers, and then you got Lucci being like, "Oh, fat buyer on the tape." This,
and I'm like, where?
I'm like, where? I constantly, when I first learned it from him years ago, because I took, and we still have this course, which is funny. It was the in-chart options course back in, I think 2017, 2016, and Lucci's doing it in like,
in his sweater.
He's in a freaking sweater on a whiteboard, right?
Yeah, the whiteboard.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then we're going into tape reading. And my first thought was, man, I must be really stupid that I can't figure this out. Like, people are taking this course and they're talking about tape in the room. And I'm sitting there like, wow, I'm really dumb, because I couldn't either. For me, it was really difficult, right? To kind of learn, tape. It just moves so fast. Like, I'm like you, I'm visual, right? So it took me some time, but anyways. Yeah, so you're taking the course, right?
Taking the course, and again, same thing. Especially with the level 2, when I saw it for the first time, there were things that I saw in what Lucci taught in how to read tape, and I was like, oh, you know what I mean? It's like, you remember that scene in the Matrix when Keanu Reeves is in. I use this because Lucci loves the Matrix, but that scene with the fountain, and then Scarlett Johansson in the red dress goes by, and the guy's like, "You like that? I put that in there." I was like, "Oh, Like that's what Lucci's trying to show me, the girl in the red dress at
Right.
the top.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it was a little bit of a light bulb moment there. And I was like, okay, now can I take that and can I take unusual option activity and can I take technicals and can I gain an advantage? And when I started putting all of this stuff together, I went to Lucci and Charlie and I was like, I got something and here's how I want to propose how I can be a value add, and here's my background, and here's why I'm not crazy, and here's how I want you guys to give me an opportunity to show you what I've put together and how that works. And Charlie and Lucci graciously both were like, we'll let you do a beta on how you use leaps to apply for for people who want longer term trades. And there were a handful of people that went through that beta period with me, and we were wildly successful. And that's what gave Lucci and Charlie the confidence to say, okay, let's let Ronchero be a part of the organization and the team that leads that helps us lead educationally and works with the people that are in the steam room. And I don't remember what year that was. I would have to go back and look. But there, for me, in a work environment, there's nothing else that I would rather do. I mean, this is you know what I mean. And I had great technical recruiting wasn't fantastic. It wasn't really my thing. I really loved medical device, and I was really good at it for a really long time until I finally got to a point where I was like, well, what I'm doing trading wise is I'm doing better there than I am over here, and I'm starting to lose interest. You know what I mean?
Right. And
So,
is that the same time then? So like when you pitched them the idea of the class, like were you full-time trading at that point too? So like you took the master course. I'm just trying to piece together the timeline of when you said,
yeah, and
hey,
that's
like I'm done with
that's
med device. We're trading.
yeah. So mentally, I'm bad at timeline. I'm bad at
Okay,
timeline.
that's
So
fine. I'm just curious if it was in like the same area. Like basically, like if I were to ask you this like straight up as a question, how long you been full-time trading? What would be like the ballpark? Like no nine to
when
five, nothing.
when was the start of the pandemic?
2020, early 2020.
So probably 2016,
Okay, so you went full
2015.
time when I found the room,
No, no,
basically.
no. I was trading full time. I was also working full time.
Okay. Oh shit! So you got med device sales into a point where it's like working itself, and you just started
Yeah.
trading.
Yep.
Okay,
And then
that's sick, dude.
and then when I finally separated from all of those worlds, it was the start of the pandemic, and the company that I was working for got bought out by Stryker, and I got a check, and I was like, that's it. But I had mentally I'd kind of mentally been checked out for years before that. It was just kind of on autopilot for me because when you get good at a job like that and you build your contacts and relationships, you have a certain pattern that you follow to make sure that those relationships and those patterns and revenue is like it becomes a maintenance mode, right? And a maintenance mode is easy to manage, but then when pressure comes for growth or new products, as long as that chain of people that you built works, you can meet those demands that are put on you, right? So I'd reached a level where I knew how to manage that piece of it, but then finally got to a point where I was like in 2020 when I was like, all right, I'm done with that. I had kind of been checked out for several years prior to that. But
Okay, so that,
I was still able to perform in both of those
yeah,
worlds.
yeah, no, that makes sense. That makes sense timeline wise. Okay, so I was just trying to piece it together in my own head of like when you did, I didn't realize that you were doing both at one point, like full time, full time. Like, everyone
Yep.
does it part time. Like I did that for a while too, until you
Yep.
move into the full time world. Because for some of us, either we've done well enough on the part time side, or we're just like, no, in order for me to really focus this, I got to go full time to do it. So, what's really cool is, as much as I've known these guys, you are the first, what I will call, an outsider to be led into the world of the team. Like, you were the first and the only, right? Like you,
Well, it all fits back to that whole thing of you can't do it, right? It was like, no, I can do it.
yeah, I got it. I got it. And that's really cool that, I mean, you know how Lucci and Charlie are. Like, if anybody has an idea, or if they, there's a lot of members in the room that are, good traders, right? Like, that have a lot of good ideas. It just takes a different person to want to teach, right? A lot of people who trade are just like, and this is kind of my issue with the industry as a whole. Like, I'll keep this quick, but my issue with a lot of this is, you have a lot of these people that have services, right? And I've tried my fair share long before I found the Steamroom. And sometimes those people give the vibe to me that the service is really what majority of their income comes from, than trading. And
Yes.
and that's okay. I'm not trying to like dog on those people per se,
Yep.
but for every screenshot that I see of someone making $100,000, $200,000 in a Robinhood account, like, I'm not trying to dog on that either, but it's just in my own head. I'm like, how much can I believe of you right now? What was so alluring about the room and everything is, all of the educators are highly successful traders. Jay is successful. You're successful. Lucy's, successful in this game. And the education is, one, it's fantastic. I'm just, even being completely objective to that, it is really, really good. But the education itself really lends to the quality of the room, and the fact that you guys saying, no, like, if tomorrow all this ceased to exist, I'm going to trade and be just fine. Like, this is really a secondary endeavor that I have, but I have a lot of passion for. Don't get me wrong, but it's something that is not necessary if it ever came to that. Like, I am successful, and that to me was what was really cool about all of this. Was like, yeah, no, these guys are legit. Uh, like Lucci, for instance, who the hell puts their P&L on fucking YouTube for everybody to see, as
Yep.
he's sitting there basically doing a FaceTime video? Like, that's just unheard of. And like, that's why I have like an issue with some of the way that people do things across the board, and why this was so great. But for you to kind of be led into that world, right? And where you're just like, yeah, no, look, I want to teach people this, because, not because I need it, but because I want to. And I have a lot of passion for being able to teach the next generation, we'll call it, traders, or even those that are, older, that haven't really figured it out, and like, just give the knowledge that you have, right? Like, that's really cool.
Yeah. And first of all, thank you. I appreciate that. I think if you look at what's also interesting is, first of all, Lucci is a very charismatic, dynamic person. And when we were all in Vegas for Traders for a Cause, you also see that um, for all that Riz and all of his cracking on all of us, and he's really good at tearing people up and being funny and all the rest of that. But he's also a really empathetic and caring person as well. And you don't see that in people. And I'm case in point. Like, you don't get that. You don't see that in the room, and you don't see that with Lucci unless you get to spend some time with some people, right? So those types of things always make a big difference in how I think the level of education, um, maybe not passion is the right word, but for the reason, right? Like the reason behind wanting to give somebody else that information also, I think comes from a place where you're legit trying to be helpful, right? You're not trying to just sell yourself, your service, etc. And I think for me that's what, when I got to the room, you could eventually feel that and see it, and that's what keeps or kept me there. And that's, I think that's probably why I fit with Lucci and Jay, is even though I don't have a filter and I am like a drunken sailor truck driver a lot of times with it, right? Like you put your earmuffs on your kids when you come to, to the steam room, mostly because of me. But the spirit behind what it is that we try to do is to give you, is to give anybody the unvarnished truth of like, hey, this is not complicated, but it's not necessarily easy, right? This is the easiest, hardest thing, in my opinion, that you'll do, but the reward and the potential reward is just massive compared to anything else that you can do, unless you happen to be one of those people that occupies that upper 1% of income, job, education, pedigree, family, etc. Everybody else has got to kind of figure it out. You know what I mean? And I don't mean it as in like, oh, if you're 1% or you're 1%er or 5% or 5%er, like your world is fucking roses. That's not the case either. All I'm saying is that people who don't have the ability to get there but want to find other places, you've got to find somebody who over a period of time you can at least trust what they have to say. And that's not to say that anything that I teach or tell you is going to work, because in the market there are no guarantees, right? The only thing that you can't guarantee anything. All you can do is say, listen, this is where we see opportunity, this is where we see probability. We have a handful of things that we're going to teach you to apply. And what we want is for you to be able to do this on your own with the knowledge that you get taught, so that whether you stay or leave, you can still continue to do it day after day and make a positive difference in your life. Even if, let's say it's as simple as, I still work my 9 to 5 and I still use a piece of this because every year it provides, I don't know, it gives me spending money for my vacation, or, it helps me replace a car, or it helps put money into my kids' college accounts. It helps me pad my retirement account. You know what I mean? Whatever it is, I just want it to be a positive outcome, knowing full well that it might not be a positive outcome. You might not be able to apply it. You might not get it. You might do everything right and still get a negative outcome from a trade. And that's just how the market works. And I feel like I try to give people that information. And it's one of the things when you talk about, if we're unfiltered or if I'm calling somebody out, like, hey, why are you doing that? Mostly it's because I see potential trouble coming for that particular trade, right?
Right.
And or it's like you might be in the right place at the right time, and you can make a bad decision and get rewarded for the bad decision. It still makes it a bad decision. And I'm trying to teach why that whatever it is that you did is probably not sustainable, and here's why. And it's because of the freaking trauma that I went through, and not wanting other people to have to endure that type of trauma. If I can help save trauma or cut down the amount of trauma or cut down the learning curve for somebody trying to go through what I went through, and I can save you that time and make you a part of our community, and then you in turn take whatever your experiences are, things that you learn, and give it to the community. That's how that's supposed to work, in my opinion.
Right. And that's actually what's really cool is the room itself is kind of turned into this melting pot, right? Like I've gotten to watch, partially directly and then partially on the sidelines, over the last 8 years, like the evolution of what it's become. And there never really was up until you showed up a long term look at the markets. And what's interesting enough about that is it's not that that's all you do either, right? Like that's just one piece of the puzzle. But what I loved about it is like I have like my cousins and a couple of them have really got into the market in the last few years, and they're always asking me like, "Hey, can you teach me this?" I go, "I can tell you what I know. I'm not an educator, right? When it comes to this, I'm just a trader. I don't have it all figured out yet, right? I do pretty good at it, right? For sure, but I'm still learning, right? But I can teach you what I do know. But when I was introduced, to leaps, for instance, not just condors, that was the first thing I kind of went to them for. I'm like, look, you guys work all day long. This is kind of more of your bread and butter. Learn how to read charts because you could do it on your off time, and
Yep.
then take a long term position. And it's similar to what you said. It's all about the time frame. And that's why the room is really cool to me. Is it's just a melting pot. You got people in there scalping. You got people swinging. You got people looking at long term stuff, and it all just coalesces into a really good conversation amongst all of our members. And that's kind of the allure, the reason that I really love it, and especially enjoyed your course. And now this context just adds another layer to it, really, for me, and I would assume for most people that are in the room, to them as well. And then for those that don't, this is a good opening act to the Ronchero way of trading, which is really unique, right? I don't see people talking about the things that you talk about on the interwebs, as Jay or you would call it. I don't see that. It's very much home run lotto tickets. There's no one saying,
Yeah.
"Hey, I'm just going to sell premium and do this, and if it goes one way, I'm going to do this," or "I'm looking at long term position here, and this is how I'm going to trade around it." Because those are not get rich quick schemes, and that's what people want nowadays. And
Right.
that's just not who you are. It's not who I am. It's not who we are. It's just that's it. We're not sitting here telling you to buy MSTR at $1 and it's going to go up to 180 bucks. Like that's fucking
I
that
wish
shit don't happen.
it does, but it doesn't happen as frequently as you would
Yeah.
want it to, right?
Yeah. And to be in it, like to
Yeah, no
be
doubt.
in it when that's going to happen, really tough. But
Yeah, or know when to like when am I supposed to pull the trigger? Like if you look at MSTR and what it did today, it sold off 100 points.
got
Yeah,
clobbered today, which
but
made complete
based on the run
sense.
up, it wasn't that bad.
Still
But if
up.
you're in it at the top, you have a problem.
Yeah. I was looking at it today, this morning, like pre market. I was curious to the comparison of like Bitcoin and MSTR because like everyone just says, well, they're going to be parallel to each other, right? And you just see this rocket ship that MSTR has been on the last like 2 weeks. That's been they've been paired up for the last 5 years or 4 years, but now it's completely decoupled and it just skyrocketed. I mean, when Bitcoin was up 120%, I think on the year, MSTR was up 700 and something percent, and you're just like,
Yeah.
holy crap! But anyways, those are the lotto tickets that everyone always wishes they could partake in.
Well, and sometimes you don't get, I mean, sometimes it's nice. You can, when those types of things show up, like oftentimes you can jump on board and some of it, you just take a leap of faith and you're like, I'm just going to see if I can get a piece of this. But there's a caveat to it. And the caveat is, well, if you don't have the capital and or you don't have the experience and or if you're not willing to accept the risk, that's one of those things where it's like you got lucky and you made a bad decision and you got a positive outcome from the bad decision, and
Right.
maybe not the next time you go to do it, but maybe the time after that or the time after that, somewhere that runs out and it erases everything that you did and then some. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. And it's very similar to what happened in like 2020 when everyone started, everyone was at home, so everyone was starting to trade more. And I was in the gaming space at the time, and I had a lot of people getting into crypto, right? Crypto is, Bitcoin obviously probably going to hit 100K by the time I even release this episode. So that'll be something else. Right now, I think it topped out at like 99,000. But back in 2020, you had everybody going on the Doge train, right?
Oh yeah.
Dogecoin, DOGE with Elon. And I had all my gaming people that work in the space. And a lot of them, for those that aren't familiar with like esports, a lot of these guys are multimillionaires. Like they're filthy rich playing video games every day. And they're buying Doge. And I'm just like, guys, this please come on. If you're going to buy anything, go buy ETH, go buy freaking Bitcoin, go buy something that at least is going to be talked about forever. I'm like, and again, I didn't know Elon was going to pump Doge up and all that, but they
Right.
all made money on it. And they're like, see? And then I'm like, again, it's a bad idea. You made that's great. Congrats. Yep. I dare you at this point almost to buy it again and watch what happens. And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, it's going to go down. It's just been around. I've watched crypto for a very long time. Like after gaming, I went into crypto, like Smitty did. Me and Smitty worked in the same industry for a long time. And I'm like, I say a long time, and it was like 2-3 years. But I was like, you watch that. I'm like, I know it's going to come. And it's very similar to what you're saying of got a positive outcome on a bad decision. You can't run with that. That's just not a sustainable way to trade or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean, you see it happen a lot. And again, that's another reason that I teach things like rolling. It's like, well, what the hell is rolling? Well, I mean, first of all, coming to Steamroom will teach you, but managing your trade. And I can remember, and I still remember conversations with people. I still have those conversations. Well, how do I know where and when I'm supposed to sell? I'm really bad at when am I supposed to sell, right? So that becomes a different a different way and chapter of those people maturing in their trading, because a lot of traders want that, oh well, I'm in the right trade and I'm up $10, or I'm up, like an MSTR, I'm up $100, or I'm up $300, and they don't do anything to their trade, and then they round trip it and come back and they wind up being red, right, or break even. It's just like, okay, if we got to teach you when and where to manage trades. Again, same thing. It's not always going to be perfect. It's not always going to be the exact number, et cetera, et cetera. But you're at least going to be in a situation like your buddies in a Dogecoin. Like as far as I know, the only way that you make money on it is to sell it, and then you're out, right? Whereas like I see a world in options where I have reduced capital risk, right, than the shareholder. The only way the shareholder makes money is to sell. Somebody who's really savvy might be able to write some covered calls, or maybe even throw a caller on, right? But that's a different level of sophistication and net worth typically that revolves around that. But if I'm the option holder and I want to stay in the trade and I don't want to get burned on a round trip, or if it comes in, well, I know that I can take my profits and I can move from one strike to another strike. Or I can decide this is a place where I'm going to protect the profit by selling it, or now I'm going to write some calls against it, or hey, I'm going to buy a put to protect the profit that's here. You know what I mean? That's the key, and that's where I think you're not going to find that level of rationality in coins or in I bought MSTR and fuck it, we're holding it, or I got GME and AMC and we're holding it. You're just not going to find that level of rationality that's going to keep and hang on to that money and take the next step. You know what I mean? And we don't. I don't want that for people. I want people to to be happy. Are you going to get every single penny out of it? No, but you're not going to give it back either. You know what I mean? And if you do give it back, you give back some of it. You're not going to give back all of it.
Those are the words of wisdom from our own Ronchero Friedman right there. I think this is a good place to wrap. Ron,
Okay.
I appreciate you hopping on and allowing me to kind of hear your story. I know for those in the room, I know they're going to really enjoy this portion of it. Right, having interacted with you every day. For those that are just listening to the pod and actually never been to the Steamroom, and you want to learn more from from Ron, I highly recommend, his course, or just come to the room and hang out. He's on the live stream almost daily with Jay, and have some interactions with some of us and other people in the room. And, maybe we can, convince you to, take the course with Ronchero over here.
Well, or just, I mean, even if you don't want to take the course, like this is not, I don't want to hold a gun to somebody's head and say you need to take the course. Just they come into the Steamroom, check us out. There's a 2 week. Hang on 1 second. I'm on a call. Good Lord.
at least that was better and less interruptive than my fire alarm going off twice, or smoke detector going off twice.
I know. Well, I was trying to text back, and
Yeah, I had to do that twice too. So don't worry, you're good.
Like I said, the course is not a requirement. I think, in my opinion, and I've spent a ton of money, and I've spent a ton of time, and I've taken a ton of courses. Even if I wasn't included, I would say just learning how to read tape, or learning how to use flow, unusual option activity. It's a game changer. And by the way, if you take the course and you look at it and you're like, I can't do that. Like, at least you learned that. You know what I mean? Like, right. at least you learned, like, oh shit, this is what it actually takes to make this work and make money in this environment. That's not for me. At least you found that out, as opposed to again, drunk in a room with the lights off, trying to figure out where the bed is. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Not that that's ever happened to me, but that's part of it, right? And the other part of it is there's a community here, and the community is cares about its members, is educational. We have fun, we talk a lot of shit, and it's a good environment. And if you are somebody that wants to learn how to trade, just coming into the environment and seeing it, I think leads people to a spot to where I think ultimately they benefit from taking the class. And we have some people in our room who have been in the room for a long time that still haven't taken the course, and those are the ones that I think are. I'm like you're missing out. Close the loop. Take the course, for God's sakes, already.
Right. Yeah. For sure. All right. Well, Ron, as my dogs start barking, as you can hear it now. Thank you again for joining me for this. I'm Joe Pokshiva. That is Ronchero Friedman for the Steamroom Trading Group. And I'll catch you guys on the next episode. Thanks.
Thank you.